We see the world through stories, through films, books, headlines, photographs, memories, and myths. But every story has another layer, one that's often forgotten, overlooked, or deliberately left out. Welcome to Behind the Curtain. Let's take a closer look. Some stories don't hide in forgotten archives or unsolved case files. They hide in everyday life. In the films we watch, the technology we build, the assumptions we stop noticing. At first glance, today's story is about robots. In reality, it's about one of the oldest survival systems in the human brain. Imagine you're walking through a shopping mall. Across the room, someone catches your eye. They look completely normal, human. They smile, they wave. But as they walk closer, something begins to feel wrong. You can't explain it. Their movements are almost natural. Their face is almost expressive. Their voice is almost convincing. Almost. Your heartbeat rises slightly. You don't know why. Nothing threatening has happened. And yet, your brain has already reached a conclusion. Be careful. That feeling has a name, the uncanny valley. It's a strange discomfort we experience when something looks almost human, but not quite. Not cartoonish, not obviously artificial, just close enough that our brains begin treating it as a person before suddenly realizing it isn't. The result isn't simple fear, nor is it disgust. It's something much harder to describe. A deeply instinctive feeling that something is violating the rules our brains use to recognize other human beings. And as artificial intelligence becomes more sophisticated, that feeling is becoming increasingly relevant. The idea was first proposed in 1970 by a Japanese robotist named Masahiro Mori. At the time, robots looked nothing like the machines we imagine today. Most were industrial arms bolted to factory floors. Simple, mechanical, obviously non human. Yet Mori noticed something curious. The more human a robot became, the more people seemed to like it. A toy robot felt charming. A robot with a smiling face felt friendlier. A robot with moving eyes felt even more engaging. Human likeness and human affection appeared to rise together until suddenly they didn't. Instead, people's reactions dropped sharply, not into indifference, into discomfort. The robot had become too human to be treated as a machine, but not human enough to be accepted as a person. Mori sketched this idea as a graph. As human resemblance increased, emotional comfort climbed steadily, before plunging into a deep valley. He called it Bukimi no Tani, in English, the Uncanny Valley. Curiously, Mori's paper contained almost no experimental evidence. It wasn't the result of decades of laboratory research. It was only 3 pages long, a thought experiment, an observation, the intuition of an engineer who had spent years watching ordinary people react to machines. Outside Japan, very few people noticed it. For decades, the paper remained little more than an obscure curiosity. Then technology caught up with the idea. In 2004, director Robert Zemeckis released The Polar Express. The film was a technological milestone. Actors wore motion capture suits. Their movements were digitally recorded. Computers recreated their performances with unprecedented realism. For many viewers, it was astonishing. For many others, it was deeply unsettling. Critics struggled to explain why. The animation wasn't bad, the technology wasn't broken. In fact, it was remarkably advanced. The characters blinked, smiled, laughed. Their skin reflected light correctly. Their mouths formed convincing speech. Everything looked almost perfect, and that was precisely the problem. Reviewers described the characters as lifeless, empty, dead eyed, like animated corpses pretending to be people. The film had reached the valley. Its characters looked human enough for the brain to activate its most sophisticated systems for reading faces, but not human enough to satisfy them. The closer the animation came to reality, the more obvious every tiny mistake became. Since then, the Uncanny Valley has appeared everywhere: films, video games, digital avatars, deepfakes, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, even customer service robots. What began as a theory about industrial robotics has quietly become one of the defining psychological questions of the 21st century. Because today, we aren't just trying to build machines that can think, we are trying to build machines that can pass as us. The question is no longer whether technology can imitate humanity, it's why our brains react so strongly when the imitation is almost convincing. The answer lies inside one of the most sophisticated systems evolution ever produced, the human face. Why does almost human feel so disturbing? The answer isn't that our brains dislike robots, it's that our brains are extraordinarily good at recognizing people. Long before we learn to read or speak, we learn faces. Within hours of birth, newborn babies show a preference for face like patterns. As we grow, the brain devotes an astonishing amount of processing power to recognizing tiny changes in expression, eye movement, and body language. It's one of the most important skills we possess. For most of human history, reading another person's face wasn't simply social, it was about survival. Modern neuroscience has identified regions of the brain that specialize in this task. One of the most well known is the fusiform face area, a region that responds far more strongly to faces than to almost anything else. But recognizing a face is only the beginning. The brain immediately begins making predictions. Is this person happy, threatened, friendly, tired, or trustworthy? Those judgments happen so quickly that we are rarely aware they're taking place. Long before we have consciously decided what we're looking at, the brain has already started constructing a model of the person standing in front of us. Most of the time, those predictions are astonishingly accurate. Imagine someone smiling at you. Your brain doesn't simply register the position of their mouth, it expects dozens of tiny details to move together. The muscles around the eyes should contract, the cheeks should rise, the skin should wrinkle in familiar ways. The timing should feel natural. The movement should flow effortlessly from one expression to another. Real human faces are full of microscopic imperfections. Ironically, that's exactly what makes them feel real. When something looks human but misses those tiny details, the brain notices immediately, not consciously, instinctively. You may not know what's wrong, you simply know that something is. Think about the difference between a cartoon and a wax figure. No one finds a simple smiley face disturbing. No one expects a Pixar character to behave exactly like a real person. The brain understands immediately that these are stylized representations. Its expectations remain low. But a hyper-realistic wax figure is different. The skin looks convincing, the proportions are convincing, the eyes seem almost alive. The closer it gets to reality, the more demanding the brain becomes. Suddenly, every tiny flaw matters. The stillness, the glassy eyes, the slightly unnatural skin, the smile that never quite changes. The brain has activated its highest resolution model of a human being, and that model begins reporting errors. That's why a cheap Halloween mask often feels less disturbing than an expensive silicone prosthetic. The Halloween mask is obviously fake. Your brain never mistakes it for a person. The prosthetic comes dangerously close, close enough that your brain briefly accepts it before rejecting it. The emotional jolt comes from that split second of contradiction. Human, not human. Safe, maybe not. Neuroscientists sometimes describe the brain as a prediction machine. Rather than waiting for information to arrive, it constantly predicts what's it about to experience. Those predictions allow us to understand speech in noisy rooms, catch a ball before we have consciously calculated its path, recognize a friend from the way they talk, even before we've seen their face. Prediction makes the brain remarkably efficient. It also makes it remarkably sensitive to unexpected errors. The uncanny valley isn't triggered because something looks strange. It's triggered because something violates a prediction the brain was exceptionally confident about. The closer something comes to looking human, the more confident that prediction becomes, which means the smallest mistake produces the biggest reaction. This helps explain why the uncanny valley doesn't become widely discussed until computers began chasing realism. Early animated films didn't have this problem. Characters in classic Disney films were obviously stylized. Nobody expected Snow White or Pinocchio to look like actual people. Even today, highly stylized animation from studios like Pixar or Studio Ghibli rarely feels unsettling. The audience understands the visual language immediately. The characters are trying to fool the brain. They're asking it to imagine. The uncanny valley only appears when technology attempts to erase that distinction. When it stops saying this is a character and starts saying this is a person. By the early 2000s, filmmakers had become convinced they were on the verge of solving the problem. Computers were becoming faster. Motion capture was becoming more sophisticated. Artists could reproduce skin, hair, and facial movement with astonishing precision. The future seemed obvious. Soon, digital humans would replace real actors. Instead, audience reacted with discomfort. In 2001, Final Fantasy The Spirits Within attempted something no major film had achieved before, a cast of entirely digital, photorealistic humans. Technically, it was extraordinary. Commercially, it struggled. Many viewers described the characters in almost identical terms: cold, empty, soulless. Their faces looked alive until they moved. Then something became impossible to ignore. The expressions lingered a fraction too long. The eyes seemed to focus without truly looking. The smiles lacked the tiny asymmetries that make human expressions feel genuine. The technology had recreated the mechanics of a face, not the experience of one. The lesson changed animation forever. Rather than chasing perfect realism, many studios deliberately moved away from it. Pixar embraced stylization. DreamWorks exaggerated facial proportions. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse rejected photorealism almost entirely, using comic book aesthetics that constantly reminded viewers they were watching animation. Ironically, the less these films tried to imitate reality, the more emotionally believable they became. Sometimes being obviously artificial is more convincing than trying to be almost real. The same pattern appeared outside cinema. Video games improved dramatically with every generation. Character models gained realistic skin, individual strands of hair, detailed facial animation. Yet developers repeatedly discovered that players forgave simplified graphics far more easily than imperfect realism. A stylized character aged gracefully. A photorealistic one became unsettling almost as soon as technology improved. The closer developers moved toward reality, the shorter the lifespan of their realism became. Then artificial intelligence arrived, not as science fiction, as software. Within just a few years, AI systems could generate faces of people who had never existed. At first, the mistakes were obvious. Backgrounds melted into impossible geometry. Eyeglasses changed shape halfway across the face. Hands contained too many fingers. Teeth seemed strangely fused together. Most people could still tell something was wrong. The valley remained visible. Then the technology improved. The obvious mistakes disappeared. Lighting became consistent. Skin texture became convincing. Hair behaved naturally. Many AI generated faces could now pass casual inspection. By 2026, millions of people had encountered photographs online without realizing the person in the image had never existed. The challenge was no longer generating believable faces. The challenge was determining whether the face belonged to anyone at all. Something similar happened with deepfakes. Early deepfake videos were surprisingly easy to identify. The face moved correctly until it didn't. Expressions lagged behind speech. Hairlines shimmered. The illusion collapsed at the edges. Those tiny imperfections were enough. The brain detected the mismatch almost immediately. It didn't know why, it simply knew something wasn't right. Today, many deepfakes are convincing enough to deceive viewers who aren't actively looking for manipulation. Voice synthesis has followed the same path. Early synthetic voices sounded robotic because they lacked rhythm. Every sentence carried identical timing, identical emphasis, identical breathing. Real human speech doesn't work that way. We hesitate, we interrupt ourselves, we inhale mid sentence, we trail off. These tiny irregularities communicate far more than words alone. Modern voice models have become astonishingly good at reproducing them. The question is no longer whether a computer can sound human, it's whether we can reliably tell the difference. When Masahiro Mori first sketched the Uncanny Valley in 1970, he imagined a future filled with increasingly lifelike robots. What he couldn't have imagined was a world where most of those robots wouldn't have bodies at all. They would exist as videos, voices, profile pictures, virtual assistants, digital colleagues, people we meet online before we ever meet them in person. The Uncanny Valley was never just about appearance, it was about trust. For decades, the valley acted almost like a built-in defense mechanism. A deep fake looked convincing until it smiled. A digital face looked realistic until you noticed the eyes. A synthetic voice sounded human until it laughed. The brain detected the inconsistency before we could explain it consciously. It was an imperfect way but remarkably useful warning system. As long as the valley existed, deception remained difficult. Something always felt off. But technology is moving toward the far side of the valley, the place Mori predicted but never explored. The point where something becomes so convincingly human that the mismatched signal never appears at all. That possibility raises questions far beyond robotics. What happens when a video of you can be generated without your knowledge? When your voice can be cloned from a few seconds of audio? Increasingly, authenticity is no longer something we can see. It's something we have to verify. Researchers have begun asking whether the next uncanny valley may not be visual at all. It may be social. Imagine speaking with an artificial intelligence every day. It remembers your birthday, your favorite books, the stories you've told it. It notices when your mood changes. It comforts you after difficult conversations. Months pass. Eventually, you stop thinking of it as a software. You begin thinking of it as someone. At what point does a relationship become real? Not for the machine, but for you. The unsettling question isn't whether artificial intelligence can simulate empathy. It's whether the human brain treats convincing simulation and genuine emotion differently. We are only beginning to find out. The uncanny valley also reveals something unexpected about ourselves. We often assume that recognizing another human being is simple. See a face, recognize a person, move on. In reality, your brain performs one of the most sophisticated calculations in nature every time you meet someone. Most of the time, the process is so seamless we never notice it. The uncanny valley is what happens when we catch the brain doing its work. For a brief moment, we become aware of an invisible system that has been protecting us our entire lives. The discomfort isn't directed at machines, it's directed at uncertainty, at a face that refuses to tell us exactly what it is. The valley exists because our brains evolved in a world where recognizing another human quickly could mean the difference between cooperation and conflict, between safety and danger. Today, the same system is encountering technologies evolution never prepared it for: artificial faces, voices, artificial relationships, and soon perhaps artificial identities. The uncanny valley is often described as a problem engineers need to solve. Perhaps it's something else entirely. Perhaps it's a mirror, a reminder that intelligence isn't what makes us human, nor is appearance. What we instinctively search for in another face isn't perfection, it's authenticity. Tiny imperfections. The countless microscopic signals that tell us another conscious mind is looking back. The uncanny valley isn't really about robots, it's about the extraordinary sophistication of the human mind. A mind so finely tuned to recognizing other people that even the smallest inconsistency can trigger an instinct older than language itself. For decades, we have assumed the challenge was making machines more human. The deeper question may be whether we still understand what being human actually means. Every story leaves something outside the frame. Sometimes it's a forgotten person, sometimes it's a missing chapter, and sometimes it's a part that changes how we understand everything else. If this story surprised you, imagine how many others are still waiting to be uncovered. Until next time, stay curious.